Tonight, I'll be chatting with Dr. Anne Charlotte Valentine, also known as Dr. Latti, author of the book Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, published in 2019. This is a remarkable tale of Dr. Latti's journey from atheistic roots in Sweden to becoming not only a naturopathic physician in America after menopause, as the title suggests, but also a medical intuitive, the result of two dramatic near-death experiences, also known as NDEs, in 1992 and 1994. The first NDE occurred as a result of serious complications following the dramatic birth of her third child in the midst of a major California earthquake. The second NDE developed after many months of ill health and a number of paranormal events, including malfunctioning lights, appliances, and watches, and sensing the presence of spirits. After years of healing her body and integrating her spiritual experiences, Dr. Latti was prompted by a spirit message to become a physician. After spending several years gathering pre-med requirements, she began medical school in 2012 and graduated from the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Tempe, Arizona in 2016. Dr. Latti has also trained as an evidential medium at the Arthur Findlay College in England. And this is her book, Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul. So, Dr. Latti, I understand from your book that your first near-death experience, which took place in 1992, was a case of a very close encounter with death that didn't involve any of the familiar characteristics of NDEs, such as seeing a light, meeting deceased relatives, experiencing a review of your life, taking a tour of the universe, or encountering a spiritual being who offers the possibility of returning to life in the physical body. However, the second NDE, which occurred in 1994, was accompanied by encounters with what could be called celestial light, music, and beings, as well as an awareness of an energetic grid connecting all life on Earth. Could you tell us something about these spiritual experiences?
Yes. So having these near-death experiences really changed my view of how I fit in to this incarnation or this life. Because before I had these experiences, I didn't have any beliefs in religion. I didn't have any beliefs in the afterlife. I thought that you die and it's black and you're gone. And that's pretty much it. So when my first near-death experience happened in the ER, and I didn't see the tunnel, like you mentioned, I didn't see the light, but I left my body and I knew that I was dying. And 1 second I was inside my body and the next second I was outside. And as I got pulled out of my body, my first thought was, how can I be outside my body and still be me? I was completely perplexed. And I was, it's like you still have the ability to think, and being, floating above my body, knowing that I belong to the body down there on that table. But even though I did not leave the ER room, I knew that there was no time. Time did not exist in this state. And I also understood that I had access to past, present, and future all at the same time. There was no time. And there was this feeling of, unconditional love and peace, and not at all, you would think, right before I died, I was in a panic mode, trying to stay in my body. And, I understood that I was dying. But once I was outside my body, everything was just peaceful and calm. And it was more of a surprise that how could I possibly exist in this state? And so then they saved my life. I got pulled back into my body. And then I was really sick. I had something called bone marrow suppression. So I had very low immune system, very low platelet counts. I would bruise very easily. and I was, getting sick every 6 months. I had pneumonia. And 2 years later, I have my second experience. And it was because I was so sick. But this time it happened at home and I wasn't in the ER. And so, of course, for many years, it was difficult to even describe or talk about this incident, because being, now that I'm a physician, it's very difficult to, how do I put that into context for other people? How can I show them that that is not a dream? This is something that happened. But since then, I've learned that there's near-death experiences, and then there's spiritually transformative experiences. And in the end, it doesn't really matter what it was that happened or how it took place, because it isn't what happened to the person. It is what happens inside of that person. How did these experiences transform that person? So as you mentioned, in that second experience, I became aware of spiritual beings, and I heard the most beautiful music that you can't even make on the earth plane. And I was surrounded in this bright white light that just extended into infinity. But there was also this knowing that we come from this light and we are this light. We carry this light within us. And that's where we return. That's where we go at the end, because our life is eternal. And then I was introduced to two spirit entities that showed me a grid around the earth. And they said everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that, I got sent back. So there are many different types of near-death experiences. I was one of those that, what is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back. And I was sent back. There was no choice in staying. There was no outs, and people talk about all these different things. But it's what happened afterwards. And being a very scientific person, having the belief that there was no afterlife, there was no angels. And in what I had seen in this light was angels singing this beautiful music. And it was very perplexing because I didn't believe in angels. And I was still working on trying to make sense out of my first near-death experience that had happened 2 years earlier. And I always joke because they saved me too quickly. I didn't have the full experience, so I had to have a second one. Kind of put me on my life path. But then, so what happened afterwards is that it took me many, many years. It took me literally a quarter of a century. I have been working on integrating these experiences. And as I was integrating these experiences over the next 12 years, as you mentioned, there were all my watches stopped. I had 17 watches by the time my third child was 3 years old. My whole drawer was full of watches, and sometimes they would start ticking again. But what I've learned is that many people that have these type of experiences, and there's probably millions by now, because we resuscitate people every day. People have heart attacks, and right. So we are going to have more and more people that have had these experiences, but might be afraid talking about them, because just like I was afraid for many, many years, I wasn't able to share my experience because I figured people would think I was absolutely crazy, and they would probably lock me up in a hospital somewhere. And that is always frightening, because it depends what your original beliefs were. And because I didn't have any of these beliefs, I was afraid that people would view me and saying, that was just a dream. That's crazy. That can't happen. Life is not eternal. And they would challenge what I had learned. But I knew, now I understood this to be the truth, because the experience of having a near-death experience, so spiritually transformative events like that, they appear more real than me being here right now. So there is a sense of that life over there on the other side is more real than what we're having here, which is probably why the shamans call our life a dream. We're in a dream because there are times when it seems like that. This is the hard part, being here on the earth plane, where we have to grow our soul and learn things. But it's over the years after these experiences, incorporating what had happened, and then putting it all together and understanding what had transpired, and then how to use that knowledge. And what happened is that I became more and more aware of the spirit world. And the spirit world would show me things that were going to happen. They would show me, you're going to be in an accident. These two kids are in the car. My watches would stop. Spirits, departed family members would drop in on me and say, I've left them on the other side. And all these things just kept happening. So after 12 years of these experiences, I learned to trust in these messages that we literally all get messages all the time. And everybody has a spirit guide, and everybody has intuition, and everybody knows, I think, deep inside them that their loved ones on the other side are still with them, and they come in and check on them. And you hear many stories. I couldn't find my car keys, but then my dad whispered in my ear from the spirit world that I had left them on the bureau in the other room. And people get messages like this all the time because we are intuitive creatures. And that's what I think part of my path now is. Not only did I have to, fulfill my path as a healer, not just healing people physically, because you can't heal somebody just physically. That's a whole other discussion, but you have to integrate the emotional part and the spiritual part and the physical part if you want to create healing. So I don't know if you have any specific questions or if you want me to elaborate on any of that.
Actually, I'm curious about something I read in your book. So you were involved for a while with an organization called the International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANDS. And some years ago, I spoke for them. They had a chapter here in Boston, and I was very impressed by the way it was such a safe environment for people to come and share their experiences so that they didn't have to deal with that challenge that you were talking about. So I think it would be very helpful if you could say a little bit about your own experience of IANDS as a possible resource for people who may be listening to our interview who are struggling with some of that self-acceptance, challenge with talking about their experience to others.
Mm-hmm. So IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, is a great resource for anybody who has had a near-death experience or even a spiritually transformative event. And they have on their website listings of typical things that happen to people that have had these experiences, especially near-death experiences. The physiological effects that happen and the psychological effects that happen. And in their listing of the different possibilities of sort of so-called side effects of having a near-death experience is watches stopping. And that's what I experienced. All my watches stopped within a week. I returned 3 of them to Target, which is like a Caldors on the East Coast. And they just said, we haven't gotten any other watches back. And after I returned 3 of them, my friend said, you know what? It's not the watch, it's you. So, and then it took me a long time. And it took 12 years for my watch to tick exactly 12 months. And on average, it took 1 month, each year, after 1 year, my watch would tick a month. After 2 years, my watch would tick for 2 months. And after 12 years, it finally ticked for 12 months. So it was a long journey, and all other things happening too. Vacuum cleaners turning on, televisions turning on, just a lot of electrical interference. But that is very common to people who have had a near-death experience, and I don't think they know exactly why that is happening. But the way I look at it is we are polarities. We have positive and negative, and that's how we do an EKG is on the electrical charges of the heart, the electrical charges of the brain. We have communication. It's not just chemical communication, it's electrical communication. And when you have an experience like that, when you're that close to death or dead, and then you come back in, it is, when you look at it, it's kind of like rebooting your computer. And so that reboot, something did not reboot correctly. And so something is off that is now interfering with your environment. And one of those things would be electrical. So now you're off. You know what I'm saying? You're not vibrating at that same frequency.
Yeah, there's another possible way of looking at it too, which is you're already halfway in a state of timelessness. and the watches are actually responding to that. You could say symbolically, you could say electrically, but it's almost like they're reminding you, hey, you're timeless.
That's a very good point. I love that. I love that philosophy. That's right. That's great.
So another thing from the book that I was really interested in, I'm a musician. I was trained as a composer. And here you were trying to pick out on a synthesizer the sounds and the notes that you experienced in that music. Can you say something more about that, please?
Yes. So I heard this most beautiful music, and you can't make it on the earth plane. I cannot find any sound that comes even close to the sound that I heard. And it's when you hear people talking about they saw colors or they had these experiences, but we can't quite find them here in this plane. And I tried for days to find any sound that came close to what I had heard. We had a big Roland synthesizer, probably with over 100 sounds back then. This is in the early 1990s. And I could not find one sound that sounded like the music that I had heard, because it was that there was also some familiarity about this. And there is this what is it called, some study, the miracle study, the book of, and there is a text in there that's called The Forgotten Song. You can just Google it, The Forgotten Song.
Course in Miracles?
Yes, The Course in Miracles. I have never done The Course in Miracles, but somebody showed it to me. And that description of the forgotten song is the closest that I have ever found a description of what I heard. Because there is some kind of familiarity with that beautiful song. It's almost, it's like a sense of this is where I come from. This is home. This is who I am. I'm part of this. I'm part of this creation. I'm part of this universe. I'm part of this light. I'm part of all that is, because we are all connected and it's all one. But when we come into this incarnation, we have the perception of being separate, but truly we are not separate.
So I want to move on to another area of your life. In doing research for this interview, I listened to a podcast by a young woman, Olivia DeGennaro, who calls herself a spiritual journalist. It's quite a fine podcast, so if people would like to learn more about you, I recommend it. I was quite impressed with your description of how you handle your side-by-side careers as naturopathic physician and medical intuitive. Can you tell us something about how naturopathy and medical clairvoyance inform each other, and how you work with patients as a physician and clients as an intuitive?
So it is different, because when you work as a physician, you have to practice medicine under your license. So whatever your license encompasses, that is what you can do. So I can't really work spiritually with people when I work as a physician. I will see somebody and they, say, I have this problem. As a physician, I'm going to order labs. I'm going to order imaging, ultrasound, MRI, or whatever is needed. And then, of course, so people are familiar with that and the Western medicine and how that works. When I work with somebody spiritually, we look at things very differently, because now I can just use my intuition and tune in and feel. Many times I feel what's wrong in their bodies. So I have a sensation in my body. I'll say, you have problems with your digestion, or you have breast cancer, or you have been sick for a long time, and it's kind of a systemic feeling because I feel it everywhere. So it's very different. So and there are times also when when I work spiritually with people, or as a medical intuitive, I work with the spirit world. So I work with my spirit guides most often, though sometimes I will be working with an ancestor or a departed loved one for the client that's showing up to help out. But they will often give me a diagnosis too. So sometimes somebody shows up on the screen and I'll hear a diagnosis, medical diagnosis, and I'll say, my spirit guide tells me that you have this problem. And have you been diagnosed with this? And they say no. And I say, well, do you have any of these problems? And then list off all the different symptoms that go along with this type of disease. And then they say, yes, I've been struggling for 10 years with this. Nobody can find anything wrong with me. And they've done all the labs, they've done all the imaging. And I'll say, yes, I know why, because you have this disease that my spirit guide is telling me that typically will not show up on an ultrasound or an MRI. And then sure enough, they, I tell them what to do depending on the state they live in. I say, you need to go find this kind of, surgeon. Sometimes people need surgery, and then can guide them to that correct treatment. And other times it will be people have struggled with the problem for many, many years, and they have done all the tests, all the labs, and nobody can ever find anything wrong. But then it goes in a different direction. It goes to an ancestral issue, and we look at the ancestral part of what it is that they're experiencing, and investigate that ancestrally and see if they're repeating a pattern, or if they're struggling with a disease or symptoms that's actually caused by some form of repetition or merging or ancestral inheritance via DNA that they now are carrying, and that's why they're having a problem. So it's very different working as a physician and working as a medical intuitive. But it's not to say that when I work as a physician, it's not like the spirit world stops talking to me. So there are times when I'm working with someone and they came in, they say, oh, I'm here for a headache. And then the spirit world says, no, they're not here for a headache. They have, the much greater problem. They have, something wrong with their liver, or, they have lung cancer or something, very traumatic, but they just came in for another reason. And then, of course, I will use those messages, and it will guide me. And I'll say, hey, do you by any chance have any of these symptoms? Let's run some labs just to make sure. It's always good to run labs and do some imaging, and, and take it that way, because I can't really work spiritually when I work with a patient. I can't exactly tell them, oh, my spirit guide is telling me there's something else that's wrong with you. I think they're going to think I'm a nut, because I'm working under a license of Western medicine. So I have to stick to that, and I have to code everything. I got to chart everything, right? These are legal documents that we are creating. So I have to stick, in that with those rules when I work as a physician. But it's not to say I'm turned off. I'm still going to listen, and I'm still going to suggest, but in a different way to the patient, that we should probably do some labs.
I was very impressed also in that interview with your extremely common sense approach to combining Western medicine with naturopathy, which is a more alternative form of medicine, and with your intuitive abilities. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the relationship between naturopathy and traditional Western medicine, because I'm not sure everybody in our audience will know what that is. But especially, I'd like for you just to say a few words about your standpoint as a spiritual physician on alternative treatments without Western medicine, because it seems like many so-called New Age practitioners will recommend that route. And I was impressed with what you said to the spiritual journalist about pretty much going every which direction you possibly can to make sure that everything can be done to take care of yourself. So what do you have to say to that?
Yes. So naturopathic medicine is different from a regular, what we call allopathic MDs. So here in the state of Arizona, I'm called an NMD, naturopathic medical doctor, versus a regular MD is just a medical doctor. And the difference between the two is that a naturopathic physician is taught to go to the root more, trying to figure out what is the cause of the problem, versus if you go to a regular doctor and you have high blood pressure. Let's say you have high blood pressure, you go to a regular doctor, he gives you blood pressure medication. You come to a naturopath, if your blood pressure is very high, I'm still going to give you the blood pressure medication because I don't want you to have a stroke, right? But over time, we will wean you off that blood pressure medication by changing your diet, by changing the way you live, doing acupuncture, taking herbal supplements. Because as a naturopath, we're not just trained in pharmaceutical drugs, we're also trained in botanical medicine, acupuncture, and homeopathy. So our toolbox is just a bigger toolbox. We have more options how to treat the patient, and we're taught to go to the root. So we want to know what's causing it. Why is it that you're sick in the first place? Let's fix it so that you don't have to be sick the rest of your life and take all these medications the rest of your life. But it's not to say that everybody can get off their medications, because the way you have to look at it is, how did you incarnate for this life? Maybe you incarnated to learn to take a medication in this life, and that's just your life path. But people get, I often, because I am spiritual and I work spiritually, I sometimes get patients that say, oh, I can heal this. I want to get off all my medications. And I say, no, not so fast, because you have to work slowly. You can't just, we're living in a McDonald's world. Everybody wants a drive-through and a quick fix to everything, but it doesn't work that way. It takes years to change that patterns that made you be in this sick state to begin with. It didn't happen overnight. So if you are, 45 or 50, you've probably been working on this for about 50 years now. And now you have this problem. So it's not like it's going to go away in a week. You have to, trace back all the different steps and unwind all of that. But the Western medicine is very good at acute conditions. If you have a heart attack, you're in a car accident, the first place I'm going is the ER, because we are amazing at saving people's lives. We're not that great at dealing with chronic conditions. And there are a lot of conditions that people have that typically don't show up on regular lab tests or imaging. And all those people fall through the cracks. And those are the people that typically seek me out, and to find different ways to figure out what is it that they have and how can they heal. So it's quite the journey of integrating the two, the Western and the medical, intuitive, and the spiritual component, because you have to use all of it. We are mind, body, spirit, and you can't heal with a pharmaceutical drug. We have developed all these amazing drugs that take people out of pain and make them feel better, but you can't really heal them, right? You can suppress the symptom, but in order to heal, you really have to work on the spiritual component and the emotional component and the physical component. So when I get patients that say, I can heal myself, I say, well, let's use all the different resources we have. Let's use the pharmaceuticals, the herbs, the acupuncture, the homeopathy, the emotional, the spiritual, because that is how we're going to create healing.
Wonderful. I so much appreciate that. It's a wonderful thing. I do some counseling myself, and I often encounter people who want to just go through the spiritual route. And I don't want to tell them not to, but I also don't have any medical authority to tell them, to go that route too. But from my perspective, that's the perfect balance. So I want to go back now to what you said about ancestral healing. From what I gather, it involves healing intergenerational family trauma, something like family constellation therapy. Some people may know what that is. I know from people who practice the latter that people take roles to reenact a participant's problematic family dynamics, and that new understandings develop, both from seeing these dynamics play out and from subtle shifts in energy that operate between the players and the observers. How is your ancestral healing work similar to or different from family constellation therapy? And how did you come to develop your unique version of this healing modality? Before you answer, I think it would be helpful just to say a few words about how one is trained in ancestral healing, or maybe who was the originator of it. I'm curious about that myself.
Yeah. So ancestral healing is actually a form of counseling. And I trained under Mark Wallin, who wrote the book, It Didn't Start With You. And training was on Zoom, and we were 200 physicians and counselors from around the world, 17 teaching assistants. And for months, we are on this webinar on and off on a weekly basis. And then we had to do homework and work with other counselors and physicians and resolve their ancestral traumas as we went along. So it is a form of counseling. So that is the base of the way I work with it. And with that, and of course, in medical school, we also have training in counseling because we have to be able to diagnose a patient, knowing when to send somebody on to a psychiatrist or further counseling, etc. So we do get the basics of counseling in med school. And then that together with the ancestral healing and my training in mediumship and shamanism has merged all of them into a very unique way that I work with it. And the interesting part is that the way I got interested to understand ancestral healing further was because I was working as a medium, and I had like 4 readings in a row that showed me traumatic events and family abuse, starting with the grandmother, and how I would see how she was physically abused by her husband. And then I would see the client's mother or father in the mix of children. And then I would see the mother marrying the same person that her father had been, also somebody who was abusive, and then see how my client was physically abused as a child. And so I would say, this is what the spirit world is showing me. And is this something that happened to you? And they would say, yes, that is exactly what happened. And after I had 4 of these in a row, I said, okay, spirit world, after 25 years of working with the spirit world, they're hearing messages. I know that they're trying to tell me something. So I started investigating and then found this course with Mark Wolin and actually studied ancestral healing. And that gave me the tools to not just work with the spirit world. So I now have tools working with someone. So when there's different ways that we take on these problems from our ancestors, and it's similar to family constellation therapy in the sense that with family constellation therapy, so these families that had abuse in them, they will reenact that, like you said, with role play. Versus in ancestral healing, the client will say, they have a problem. I'm sick all the time, or I don't feel nurtured. I have problems with my relationships. I have OCD. I have anxiety. I have panic attacks every time I hear a siren, or whatever the problem is. And then what we do is then we look at that and say, well, if you have panic attacks every time you hear a siren, did something happen to you in your childhood that caused you to have this panic attack? Are you remembering something? And then it's many times they say no, they don't have a memory, because it is a trauma. It's a traumatic event that has been inherited. And so the way we inherit these events, it's the unresolved actions and reactions and interactions of your ancestors that get passed down either via DNA, because we now know that we have found certain genes like the FKBP5 gene, that it carries trauma. So if a traumatic event that happened to your grandfather, you may now have the same reaction to an event like that. So let's say your grandfather served in World War II. Every time he heard the air sirens go off, he thought, this is the day I'm going to die. And he had panic and he thought, this is it. I'm not going to be alive. And then he survives the war and he has children, and then his children has children. And now the granddaughter has panic attacks every time she hears a siren, but she has never had a traumatic event regarding sirens. So now we know it's coming from somewhere else, that siren. And then we can trace it back to it's the grandfather's experience. It's his traumatic event that was passed down. So not only is it passed down on DNA, but it's also passed through, like I say, the energetic grid, because we are all connected. And we are connected. I think the Theosophical Society talks about karma and how every action, every thought has an action on the equilibrium of the universe. And the universe is always trying to restore this equilibrium to harmony. And that is the karma from Theosophical Society, but it also fits very well with ancestral healing, because it is the traumatic events that happened to our ancestors that are coming back because they're unresolved. and it gets passed down. And, I always say people have a little bucket. They carry a bucket. And if their mother didn't resolve the problem or the grandmother didn't resolve the problem, that ticket is now in your bucket. And so you have the ticket now to try and resolve it. And it's your job to figure out, well, why do I have these panic attacks? Oh, wait, my grandfather. But once you understand that the panic attacks that you're having when you hear a siren aren't really yours, you inherited them. They came from an ancestor and they were passed down. So either on the via the DNA or the energetic grid or karma, if you want to say that, because it's the universe's way of restoring harmony and equilibrium. And that is how you resolve ancestral trauma. It's by taking any kind of problem or fear or disease or any issues that you're experiencing in your life. You take that issue and then we trace it back and we see where is it coming from. So even people who have diseases, I've worked with clients who, for example, the father died when the mother was 40. So the father left the woman when the woman was 40. Then the daughter has a divorce when she's 40. And so the man also leaves her life at the same age. And I call it the ancestral clock. It's just ticking. And many times events happen like that at the exact same age. It happened for your mom, or could be anybody, your sister, your grandmother. And that's what we learn to figure out, to trace that. How do we trace that back and how do we create healing for it? So when I work with it, there's also times when people don't remember a lot because they had a lot of traumatic events in their childhood. And so they don't have clear memories of what transpired. And I've worked with clients that say, I don't have any memories until I was about 12 years old because their childhood was so traumatic. But what I do then is I incorporate shamanism and journeying. And I take them on a journey to meet their spirit guides or spirit animals that will help them show them what happened or show them where the problem is coming from. And so it's an integration of the counseling I learned in med school with ancestral healing, counseling methods, and then merging that with my shamanism, and understanding that, the soul, we can journey to find that information. And there's so many guides. We have spirit guides and spirit animals that help us along on our journey all the time. But it's a matter of integrating all of this and in order to create that healing. And sometimes, like I said, I will have a spirit come in and show me, especially if the client can't remember, and they say, well, my father's in the spirit world. And then the father comes in and shows me things. And then I will say, do you remember any of this? This is what I'm seeing. And so it is all about restoring harmony in the client's life and in his ancestors' life and in his future offspring's life. Because when we do a healing at the end, which we always do, we send healing not just to the client, but also to the ancestors that originated with this, that were the cause of the problem in the first place, where the problem originated. So we send healing backwards in time, we send healing to the client, and we send healing forward in time so that we can restore that equilibrium and harmony in the universe. Because once the client understands where it's coming from, the problem is not the same anymore. That fear is not the same. And people can have OCD or problems like that. And once they understand where it came from, it goes away literally in 24 hours. And so it's just, it's magical, because it's when we change that perception, because everything is based on our perception, the way we view our life, which then comes from our childhood and how we interacted with our parents and how we were nurtured or not nurtured as children. And all that then reflects back into our perception of how we perceive life. Because when you were a toddler, you learned that if I do this, I'll be safe. If I do that, I will get spanked or sent to my room. And so you learned certain behaviors and certain ways of being. But the way that you grew up as a child and the things that you experienced as a child often came, if there was problems, often came from one of the parents or the grandparents, and it trickled down because the parent often experiences the exact same problem the client is experiencing, but the connection has never been made. And so now you can make the connection saying, wow, the problem I'm experiencing, my mother had the exact same problem, but it was different circumstances, but emotionally she had the same problem. And so it's all about creating harmony, restoring equilibrium from our ancestors, from all the actions, reactions, and interactions of our ancestors, because they all make a difference. And many times also when you're a child and you might remember sitting at the Christmas table at Christmas and all the relatives are there. And then you say, what about Uncle Billy? And then your mother turns to you and she says, shh, we don't talk about Uncle Billy. Oh, now you already know. If you have any stories like that in your family, you know that there is an ancestral problem. Somebody is picking up on and trying to restore that or reliving the problem that Uncle Billy had, because it's just going to keep coming back. That energy keeps circulating back into the next generation and next generation. And it's almost like, loops. We're tied together with our ancestors, but we have the perception that we are separate.
If you may, I'd like to add a comment here. So coming back for a moment to the Theosophical idea of karma, there is, I suppose, some danger in thinking that these ancestral things are visited upon innocent people. But I have a feeling that since we choose our parents, that we might choose to come into a situation where there is some kind of family history at the same time as there is some kind of reincarnational history that may not involve the family. And I was just thinking, many of the books that I've read about reincarnation written from a theosophical perspective try to answer the question, why should we have to go through this if we don't remember? Now, from your perspective in ancestral healing, it's why should I have to go through this if it's part of my family and it didn't happen to me directly? But in the Theosophical Society, the question was, why should I have to do this when I don't remember my past life? And as I was listening to you talking, I suddenly had an insight, which is that the ancestral karma is the way that it shows up in the present lifetime to remind us of the reincarnational karma that we also need to clear. And so there's like double duty going on. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say absolutely. After all these years, after my near-death experiences, I really do believe, even when we have hardships, even my own hardships, why did I have to have 2 near-death experiences? Why did I have to be sick for 6 years? I couldn't even stand up and cook for my children. I had a stool in the kitchen. I was getting sick every 6 months. Why did I have to live through so much suffering and pain? I had such an easy childhood. I was, healthy and I was cared for. I didn't have, traumatic events, but then I had to have these experiences. But the way I look at that now is, without those experiences, I would not be doing what I'm doing today. And now I understand that I incarnated as a healer, and I had to have these experiences and resolve these issues, my own health issues, in order to help other people heal. Because when you have had these experiences yourself, it's you can step into that role in a very different way to help other people find healing. But I do believe that we incarnate for that. And I always say, did I take this ticket? I got this ticket. I took ticket 33, 158, 463. I said, I'm going to have relationship problems. I'm going to marry the wrong person. I'm going to be sick for a certain number of years, right? And then as you go through life, when in my book, I talk about how you got all these sticky notes and you put them in your backpack, and then you say, okay, I'm ready to fly down. And here I come for my incarnation. And then you get to Earth and you don't remember any of these sticky notes that you put in your backpack and all the problems that you said, oh, it'll be so easy, I'm going to resolve all these issues. And then you incarnate and you have your experiences. And many times you will see the problems keep coming back. So you marry a person, and and then after a certain number of years, you divorce the person because it didn't work out. And then you marry the exact same person again. The same problems manifest, and you divorce again. And then you say, wow, why are my relationships never working out? And you do it again, one more time. So to me, that's your incarnation. There is something going on here, and that is probably something ancestral. And when you look at these problems ancestrally, you will see the repetition, and you will see many times, the mother or the father had the exact same issue, and you then rejected that behavior. You didn't like that about them. But anything that you reject, you also invite back because it's unresolved. There is no harmony. You're disequilibrium now. And so you have to invite it back into your life in order to resolve those issues. And that's really what ancestral healing is resolving the issues that keep coming back.
So Dr. Latti, I'd like to bring our interview to a close with one final question. Your book is truly a unique spiritual autobiography, combining prose accounts of historical events, poetic retelling or processing of these events, and spiritual messages and exercises developed from them. Toward the end, you bring up the subject of healing the divine feminine. It's clear that one purpose of your book is to inspire women of all ages to do what their heart tells them. I've heard you say that men who have read the book have also found it inspiring, but it seems to me there's a larger cultural project here, that humanity as a whole is in need of healing the divine feminine. How might such things as near-death experiences, medical clairvoyance and related abilities, and healing modalities such as ancestral healing play a role in the spiritual evolution of humanity?
We live in a world that is in constant change. We are in a window right now, according to an old prophecy, South American prophecy, where we have to learn to work together. So in this old prophecy, which is more than 500 years old, they talk about the eagle, and the eagle signifies the north and the mind and architecture and structure and building. And that is the symbol of the eagle. And the symbol of South America or the South is the condor. The condor is a symbol of the heart. And so that is, the way the world has been divided. But right now we are, according to this old prophecy, we are living in a window now where the condor and the eagle are merging. And which is why we're seeing also a lot of interest in shamanism and saving the earth and botanical medicine. People are returning to that divine feminine, the creation, the source. And when we talk about earth, right, our mother earth, it is the divine feminine, the creation. But the way we have structured our world, it's all based on economic power and greed. And we have lost the connection of who we truly are, and that we are all connected to each other. We are all humans. And it doesn't matter what country you live in or your race or your ethnicity, because we are all humans. We're all here together. And just like the eagle and the condor will come together, what the prophecy says is that they will fly together. And that is what we have to do as a humanity. We have to come together, because if we don't, we are going to destroy our own habitat, which is the earth, because we are part of the earth. We are creatures of the earth. Just like the bees are part of nature, but we also, as are creatures of earth. Looking at the bigger picture, just looking at the body has all these different organs. And my heart could be the bees and my spleen could be the cows, right? So that is my body. So I have this little microscopic version of the universe within myself, but all of us together on earth is also part of the earth. But we have lost that we have lost touch with who we are and where we came from. And that is the divine feminine that is now coming back into power. And we need to, we need to have more compassion for everybody on earth, not just ourselves and our company or our financial stability. It's all about coming together and unifying as a human race. But not only are we all connected to each other, we are connected to the plants, to the animals, and to Earth itself, because we are all one in the end. And so that is also something that's dear to my heart, is to teach people, and I talk about it in my book, as you mentioned, to teach people to see themselves from a different perspective of how they fit in to this dimension, that, why are they here and what is the purpose of life? And to me, that would be, it's all about raising consciousness, creating love and harmony and equilibrium of the universe itself, because we are part of that.
Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed that exchange between these two remarkable people. And if you did and like to learn more about Dr. Lotte's teachings and what she can share with you, I do invite you to join her Ancestral Healing Masterclass, which she will be teaching on Saturday, August 13. It will be from 1 to 3 p.m. And I am sure that whoever can join this is going to learn a lot of skillful tools for dealing with one's own spiritual journey. Now, I'd like to invite you to join us again Thursday next week, when we will have Dr. Glenn Keswer speaking on quantum entanglement, consciousness, and the vision of oneness. I do hope you can join us. In the meantime, please stay safe and be well. Good night to you all.